Verified department records. Genuine field evidence. Unbiased justice. Welcome to Bodycam Incident Reports.
Step away from the fence, now! You're being detained.
I am on my own property, officer. My hands are empty.
You expect me to believe you own this place?
I don't expect belief. I expect the Constitution.
Turn around, hands behind your back, now!
You're making this a federal problem.
The camera on the dashboard of the patrol cruiser captured every pixel of the scene. The body camera on Officer Kyle Braden's chest recorded every vibration of his shouting voice. But what neither camera could capture was the sinking feeling in the pit of the stomach of anyone watching who knew the law. Because the man standing calmly by the split-rail fence wearing a faded olive-drab t-shirt and work boots was not a scrapper. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't a transient looking for copper wire. He was Colonel Marcus Thorne, USMC, retired. He was the owner of the 40-acre estate behind him, and he was about to teach Officer Braden a lesson in constitutional law that would end with the city writing a check so large it would make the evening news across the entire state. Before we dive into the details of this infuriating and vindicating story, I need you to do something for me. Pause for a second and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from, your state, your city, your country. And if you believe that a badge is a responsibility, not a license to bully innocent citizens, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We tell the stories the mainstream media often ignores. This is a story about dignity, discipline, and the high cost of assumption. You don't want to miss how this unfolds. It was 10:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. The sun was high and bright over the rolling hills of the upscale equestrian community of Hidden Valley. It was the kind of neighborhood where driveways were a quarter-mile long and the mailboxes were made of brick and stone. Marcus Thorne loved this time of day. Since retiring from the Corps and subsequently selling the heavy construction firm he had built from the ground up, Marcus had found peace in manual labor. He didn't need to fix the fence himself. He could have hired a crew to replace the entire perimeter without glancing at his bank account. But Marcus was a man who believed in the value of work. He believed that if you owned land, you took care of it. He was working on the north section of his property line, where a recent storm had brought down a heavy oak limb, crushing a 10-foot section of the cedar rails. He had his truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that he kept pristine, parked on the grass inside the fence line. He was focused, methodical, twisting galvanized wire to secure the new mesh backing. He didn't hear the patrol car approach. The cruiser was silent, rolling up the public road that ran parallel to his fence. Officer Kyle Braden saw what he wanted to see. He saw a black man in dirty clothes. He saw an old truck. He saw tools. And he saw a high-end property that in his mind didn't match the man standing in front of it. Braden was 29 years old with just over 3 years on the force. He had a reputation in the precinct, though not the kind you want. His sergeant called him high energy. The veteran officers called him a liability. He had transferred from a neighboring district 6 months prior after a series of conduct unbecoming complaints that had been quietly swept under the rug. Braden was looking for a bust. He was looking for action in a sleepy district where the biggest crime was usually a teenager driving a golf cart on the main road. When Braden slammed his cruiser into park and jumped out, hand hovering over his holster, he had already decided the narrative. In his head, he had caught a thief in the act. He didn't run the license plate on the Ford F-150. If he had, he would have seen the name Marcus Thorne and the registration address matching the GPS location of the estate. He didn't check the property records. He just reacted. "I need you to step away from the fence and keep your hands visible," Braden shouted, closing the distance. Marcus turned slowly. He didn't flinch. He didn't look for an escape route. He looked at Braden with the same appraisal he used to give junior lieutenants who showed up to briefing unprepared. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that carried without shouting. "I am stepping away from the fence. My hands are empty. The wire cutters are on the post. What is the nature of your emergency?" "No emergency," Braden sneered, walking up to the property line. "Just stopping a crime in progress. We've had reports of theft in the area. copper tools, lumber. You look like you're helping yourself to a little bit of everything." "I am repairing a fence," Marcus stated flatly. "My fence." "Your fence?" Braden laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. He looked past Marcus at the sprawling 3-story colonial house visible in the distance sitting atop the hill. "You own that, the Thorne estate?" "I do." "Right, and I'm the King of England." "Let's cut the crap. Do you have ID, or did you leave it in the getaway truck?" Marcus felt the familiar heat of anger rising in his chest, the same heat he had learned to control over 3 decades of leading men in high-stress environments. He knew exactly what this was. It wasn't about the fence. It was about who was fixing it. "My identification is in the center console of my truck," Marcus said, pointing a gloved hand toward the Ford. "I am happy to retrieve it for you to verify my ownership of this property." "Don't you move." Braden's hand dropped to his taser. "You stay right there. I don't know what you've got in that truck. You could have a weapon." "I have a registration card and a driver's license," Marcus said. "Officer, you are creating a situation where there is none. You are detaining me on my own land. Under the 4th Amendment, you need reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed. A man fixing a fence in broad daylight is not reasonable suspicion." "Oh, we got a jailhouse lawyer here," Braden said, shaking his head. "Listen, pal, I've got reasonable suspicion coming out of my ears. You don't fit the demographic. You're working on a fence that looks like it costs more than your truck, and now you're arguing case law. That tells me you've been in the system." "I have never been in the system," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "I served 30 years in the United States Marine Corps. I fought for the rights you are currently violating. I am asking you one last time to lower your voice, check your tone, and allow me to show you my identification so you can go about your day." Braden didn't like being talked down to. He especially didn't like being talked down to by a suspect he had already mentally convicted. He stepped closer, crossing the invisible line from the public road onto the gravel shoulder that was technically part of the Thorne property easement. "I'm done asking," Braden said. "Turn around, hands behind your back. You're being detained for investigation of trespassing and disorderly conduct." "Disorderly conduct?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't moved. I am standing still." "You're failing to comply with a lawful order." "Your order to get on the ground was not lawful given the medical circumstances I explained, and your order to not retrieve my ID prevents me from proving my innocence. You are creating a catch-22, officer, and you are doing it on camera." Marcus gestured slightly with his head toward the stone pillar of the gate about 20 feet away. Embedded in the stone, almost invisible to the naked eye, was a high-definition security lens. But Braden didn't look. He was too focused on asserting his dominance. Across the street, about 50 yards down, Mrs. Eleanor Gable had stepped out onto her porch to water her hanging petunias. Mrs. Gable was 74, a retired school librarian who had lived in Hidden Valley since the 1980s. She knew everyone. She certainly knew Marcus Thorne. He plowed her driveway when it snowed. He always bought the most expensive wreaths from the Boy Scout troop she sponsored, and they often exchanged books. She saw the patrol car. She saw Marcus standing by his fence. And she saw the young, aggressive officer shouting. Eleanor reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her smartphone. Her grandson had taught her how to use the camera. She hit the red button and held it steady. "Officer," Marcus said, seeing Braden unclip his handcuffs. "Before you touch me, I need to inform you that I have significant shrapnel damage in my right shoulder. If you force my arm behind my back, you will cause permanent injury. I am willing to be detained, but I am requesting to be handcuffed in the front due to medical necessity." "Yeah, right," Braden scoffed. "And I've got a bad back. Hands behind your back. Now." Braden lunged forward. He grabbed Marcus's left wrist and twisted it violently. Marcus didn't fight back. He knew that any resistance, any tensing of the muscles would be written up as assault on an officer. He let his body go limp, allowing Braden to spin him around. But when Braden grabbed the right arm, the arm that had taken a piece of an IED casing in Fallujah, and yanked it upward, Marcus let out a sharp, involuntary gasp of pain. "I told you," Marcus gritted out through clenched teeth. "My shoulder." "Stop resisting," Braden yelled for the benefit of his body camera, driving his knee into Marcus's thigh. He ratcheted the cuffs tight, too tight. The metal bit into the skin of Marcus's wrists. "You are making a career-ending mistake," Marcus whispered. "I'm taking a criminal off the streets," Braden panted, adrenaline coursing through him. "You can tell your story to the judge, although I doubt you can afford a good one." He shoved Marcus toward the patrol car. Marcus stumbled but caught his footing. He walked with his head up. He didn't look at the ground. He looked straight ahead, his eyes locking onto Mrs. Gable across the street. She gave a small wave with her free hand, the other still holding the phone. Marcus gave a barely perceptible nod. The evidence was secure. Braden opened the back door of the cruiser and pushed Marcus inside. The space was cramped. The hard plastic seat forced Marcus's shoulders into an agonizing angle. He closed his eyes and began a tactical breathing exercise. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. He needed to lower his heart rate. He needed to be sharper than the man driving the car. Braden got into the driver's seat. He was breathing heavy, flushed with the excitement of the arrest. He picked up the radio. "Dispatch 1 Adam 12. 1 in custody. Male black uncooperative. Transporting to station for processing. Charges are trespassing, resisting arrest disorderly." "Copy 1 Adam 12. The dispatcher's voice crackled. The drive to the station took 15 minutes. Braden kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting Marcus to start begging or cursing or kicking the windows. That's what usually happened. But Marcus just sat there. His eyes were open now, staring at the back of Braden's head. The silence was heavier than shouting. It started to creep under Braden's skin. Why wasn't he yelling? Why wasn't he claiming he knew the mayor? Why was he so calm? "You know," Braden said, breaking the silence, trying to reassure himself. "If you'd just shown me ID, we wouldn't be here. You did this to yourself." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't blink. "Quiet type, huh? That's fine. You'll talk when we print you and your rap sheet pops up. I bet you've got warrants. Guys like you always have warrants." Marcus remained silent. He was composing the opening paragraph of his affidavit in his head. He was memorizing the time on the dashboard clock. He was noting the speed Braden was driving. He was gathering intelligence. They arrived at the precinct. It was a mid-sized brick building shared by the police department and the county sheriff's substation. Braden pulled into the Sallyport, the garage door rumbling shut behind them. He hauled Marcus out of the car. "Let's go," Braden said, grabbing Marcus by the bicep. They walked into the processing area. The air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Behind the high booking desk sat Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 58, a man with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen everything the city had to offer for 30 years. He was drinking from a mug that said, "World's Okayest Grandpa." Miller looked up as Braden paraded his prisoner in. Miller's eyes scanned Marcus. He saw the boots Red Wing Iron Rangers, expensive, well-worn, but cared for. He saw the pants Duluth Trading Fire Hose work pants, not cheap denim. He saw the shirt clean despite the sweat. And then he saw the face. He saw the set of the jaw. He saw the eyes. Miller felt a prickle on the back of his neck. He knew a dirtbag when he saw one. He had processed thousands of them. This man was not a dirtbag. This man stood at attention even in cuffs. "What do we have here, Braden?" Miller asked, his voice cautious. "Trespassing, Sergeant," Braden said, puffing his chest out. Caught him stripping copper or something at the Thorne estate up in Hidden Valley. Refused ID, resisted arrest, had to use force to detain. Miller looked at Marcus. Stripping copper. He was working on the fence, Braden said. Claimed he owned the place. Miller paused. He looked at Marcus again. Sir, what is your name? Marcus Aurelius Thorne, Marcus said clearly. I am a Colonel, United States Marine Corps, retired. My date of birth is March 12th, 1962. My wallet is in the center console of my truck, which Officer Braden refused to let me access. I have informed this officer multiple times that he is arresting the homeowner on his own property. The room went dead silent. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner seemed to get louder. Miller looked at Braden. Did you run the plates on the truck? I didn't need to. Braden stammered, the confidence leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. I had probable cause from his behavior. He was belligerent. He doesn't look belligerent now, Miller said softly. Uncuff him. Sarge, he's a suspect. I said uncuff him to the bench, Miller barked, and give me his information. Braden reluctantly removed the cuffs and secured Marcus's left wrist to the steel bar on the booking bench. Marcus rubbed his right shoulder, wincing. Do you need medical attention, Colonel? Miller asked, using the rank instinctively. I will require a medical evaluation for my shoulder, Marcus said. But first I want you to run my name, and I want the watch commander present when the results come up. Miller typed the name into the terminal. Thorne, Marcus A. He hit enter. The screen populated instantly. It wasn't a criminal record. It was a driver's license profile linked to a handgun carry permit, linked to a high-level federal security clearance that was still active due to his consulting work. And there, in the residence field 1400 High Meadow Lane, Hidden Valley, the Thorne estate. Miller stared at the screen. He felt sick. He looked at the property tax assessment that was linked in the county database. Value $4.2 million. Owner Marcus Thorne. Miller looked up at Braden. Braden was leaning against the wall, looking bored, checking his fingernails. Braden, Miller said, his voice dangerously low. Get in here. Look at this screen. Braden walked around the desk. He looked at the monitor. He squinted. He read the name. He read the address. He read the clearance level. So, Braden said, though his voice wavered, maybe he stole the identity too, or he's the caretaker. It says owner occupied, Miller hissed. And look at the clearance. This guy isn't a scrapper, you idiot. He's a federal contractor and a retired colonel. You just arrested a war hero for fixing his own fence. I didn't know, Braden whispered. His face went pale. You didn't verify, Miller said. You assumed. Miller picked up the phone. He dialed a 3-digit extension. Commander, it's Miller. You need to come down to booking, now. Yes, sir. It's a code red on a personnel issue. Officer Braden has made a very significant error. 5 minutes later, the heavy door to the back offices swung open. Lieutenant Commander Greg Hastings walked in. Hastings was a big man, a former linebacker known for being fair but tough. He looked at Miller, then at Braden, then at the man sitting on the bench. Hastings stopped. He recognized Marcus. They had met 2 years ago at a charity gala for the Policemen's Benevolent Association. Marcus had donated $50,000 to the Widows' Fund. Colonel Thorne, Hastings said, his voice full of disbelief. Lieutenant Hastings? Marcus nodded politely. I believe we met at the PBA fundraiser. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to shake your hand today. Hastings turned slowly to Officer Braden. The look on his face was terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was the cold, hard realization of a lawsuit that was going to decimate his budget. Officer Braden, Hastings said. Keys. Sir. Give me the keys to the cuffs. Now. Braden fumbled for his keys and handed them over. Hastings walked over to the bench himself. He unlocked the cuff on Marcus's wrist. "Colonel, I am incredibly sorry," Hastings said. "Please stand up. Come to my office. We'll get this sorted out immediately." "I appreciate that, Lieutenant," Marcus said, standing up and rubbing his wrists. "But I won't be coming to your office for coffee. I will be leaving. And I will be taking the booking sheet, the arrest report, and the request forms for the body camera and dash camera footage. Colonel, we can drop all charges right now," Hastings said, trying to salvage the situation. "It was a misunderstanding. The officer is new to the area. He made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting your turn signal," Marcus said, his voice filling the room. "Profiling a citizen, denying him his Fourth Amendment rights, using excessive force on a disabled veteran, and falsifying the context of an arrest is not a mistake. It is a pattern of conduct, and I intend to break that pattern." Marcus looked at Braden. The young officer was staring at the floor, his ears burning red. "Officer Braden asked me if I broke into the main house too," Marcus said to Hastings. "He couldn't conceive that a black man in work clothes could own property in Hidden Valley. That is not a training issue, Lieutenant. That is a character issue." "I understand your frustration," Hastings said. "But I'm not frustrated," Marcus interrupted. "I'm litigious. I want the evidence preservation form signed before I walk out that door, and I want a medical examiner to photograph these wrists and my shoulder." For the next hour, the station was in chaos. The chief of police, who was at a barbecue with his family, was called in. He arrived wearing a polo shirt and shorts, looking frantic. He tried to apologize. Marcus listened politely but refused to shake hands. He signed the release forms. He collected his property, his belt, his shoelaces, his watch. When he walked out of the station, the sun was starting to dip lower in the sky. It was 3 p.m. He had lost 4 hours of his life, but he had gained a mission. He called an Uber to take him back to his truck. When he arrived at his property, the first thing he saw was Mrs. Gable still on her porch. She waved. He waved back. He walked to his truck, which was still parked on the grass. The door was open where Braden had left it. Marcus sat in the driver's seat of his truck. He didn't start the engine immediately. He looked at his fence. It was still broken. The wire cutters were still resting on the post where he had left them. He took a deep breath. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. It was a partner at one of the most prestigious civil rights law firms in the state. "Marcus," the voice on the other end answered. "It's Saturday. Everything okay?" "David," Marcus said, "I need you to clear your schedule for Monday. I have a 1983 civil rights claim to file, and I have video." "What happened?" "I was arrested for trespassing." "Where?" "In my own front yard." The silence on the other end was brief. "I'll see you at 8 a.m. Marcus. Bring everything." By Wednesday, the lawsuit was filed. By Thursday, Mrs. Gable's video was on the internet. It was titled, "Veteran Arrested on His Own Property." The internet did what the internet does. It exploded. The video was damning. It showed the calm, compliant demeanor of Marcus Thorne against the screaming, aggressive posturing of Officer Braden. It showed the lack of investigation. It showed the bias. Millions of people watched. The comments section was a torrent of outrage. Veterans groups, civil rights organizations, and property rights advocates all found common ground. The San Diego Police Department tried to get ahead of it. They released a statement about internal investigations and reviewing policy. But Marcus wasn't interested in statements. He was interested in discovery. During the deposition 3 months later, Officer Braden sat across from Marcus and his lawyer. Braden looked smaller in a suit than he did in a uniform. "Officer Braden," Marcus's lawyer asked, "can you articulate the specific reasonable suspicion you had that a crime was being committed?" He looked out of place, Braden said. Out of place in what way? It's a wealthy neighborhood. He was wearing dirty clothes. So in your assessment, wealthy people do not perform manual labor. Is that your testimony? No. I mean, he didn't look like the owner. Because he is black. No, I didn't say that. Then what specific physical characteristic made him look like he didn't belong? Braden couldn't answer. The silence was recorded by the stenographer. The settlement came 6 months later. The city knew they couldn't put this in front of a jury. The combination of the video, the lack of probable cause, and the undeniable racial bias was a perfect storm. They offered $150,000. Marcus rejected it. They offered $300,000. Marcus rejected it. It's not about the money, Marcus told his lawyer. It's about the admission. Finally, they agreed to a settlement of $850,000, coupled with a mandatory revision of the department's training protocols regarding property disputes and racial bias. But the most important part of the deal for Marcus was the public apology. The chief of police had to stand at a podium and admit on record that Marcus Thorne had done absolutely nothing wrong and that the department had failed him. Officer Kyle Braden was fired. The internal investigation found that he had violated 6 different department policies. He was also decertified by the state board, meaning he could never work as a police officer in that state again. The day the settlement check arrived, Marcus didn't deposit it into his personal account. He endorsed it over to the Legal Defense Fund for Veterans, a nonprofit that helped former service members who couldn't afford legal representation. A year after the incident, Marcus was back at his fence. It was a Saturday morning. The sun was shining. He was replacing a rotted post on the south side of the property. He was wearing the same faded olive drab t-shirt. A police cruiser drove by. It slowed down. Marcus stopped working and looked up, his body tensing slightly, a reflex he couldn't quite shake. The cruiser rolled to a stop. The window came down. It was a young female officer. "Good morning, Colonel Thorne," she called out. "Just patrolling. Everything quiet out here?" "Quiet as a church mouse, officer," Marcus replied. "Good to hear. You have a great day, sir." She waved and drove on. She knew who he was. Every cop in the county knew who he was now. Marcus watched the car disappear around the bend. He looked down at his hands. They were calloused, strong, capable. He picked up his hammer and drove a nail into the wood. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound echoed across the hills. It was the sound of ownership. It was the sound of freedom. But as he worked, Marcus thought about the men who didn't have his rank. He thought about the men who didn't have 40 acres. He thought about the teenagers in the city who got stopped for walking on the sidewalk, who didn't have Mrs. Gable filming them, and who didn't have a high-powered attorney on speed dial. He knew he had won his battle, but he also knew the war was far from over. This story matters because it forces us to ask a difficult question. What would have happened if Marcus Thorne had been a janitor instead of a colonel? What if he had been renting a small apartment instead of owning an estate? Would the outcome have been the same? Or would he be sitting in a cell right now with a criminal record for resisting arrest? Marcus Thorne used his power to fight back not just for himself, but to shine a light on a system that often operates in the shadows of bias. He proved that dignity isn't something a badge gives you. It's something you carry inside you, and no amount of handcuffs can take that away. Thank you for reading this story with me. If this made you stop and think about the reality of policing and privilege in America, please share it. Send it to a friend, a family member, or post it on your timeline. We need these conversations to happen. And before you go, I have one question for you. Do you think the punishment for Officer Braden was enough? Or should officers who violate civil rights face criminal charges, not just termination? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.
Every historical record holds a profound story waiting to be carefully uncovered. Every story we explore is a deliberate step closer to the ultimate truth. Thank you for joining us on this vital journey of discovery today.